guys.
Nadia.
Hi,
Hey, everybody.
Nadia. Welcome, everybody, to DMALA. Thank you guys all for joining us. We're live, in case you didn't notice. Nadia just joined us, so I'll go ahead and introduce her first. She is our newest member of DMALA. So you guys might remember her. She's been a member. She's been coming for years, and now she's an official part of the team. So welcome, Nadia. So I'm Katie. This is Warren, our special guest, Geoff, who I'll introduce in a minute, Mike White, Michael Mondragon, and Steve Toyama is not here tonight, but he helps us out as well. So we are the volunteer team of DMALA. So yeah, thank you guys all for being here. We have a really exciting talk for you tonight. Geoff Ciccarelli is our special guest, coming to us live from Pennsylvania. But Geoff used to live in LA, and he also was a longtime member of DMALA. And I met Geoff many years ago. He was one of the first people I met freelancing. And so I knew him first as a really talented character animator who did a lot of stuff in, well, pretty much any program you can use to animate characters. He's very well versed in a lot of software. But he's since gone on to do many other things. And one awesome thing about Geoff is that he always has his own creative side project going on, in addition to working as a full-time freelancer for a whole bunch of great studios in LA and beyond. So, so he's going to be talking to us tonight about his current project. Or are you finished with it, or you're still working on it, Geoff?
Oh, still very much working on it.
Okay, so his work in progress. But you guys are going to get a sneak peek at his new game that he is developing for Google Play, and it's he's developing it completely on his own, doing all the design and all the developing in Unity and everything. So he's going to give us a little inside peek into his process. So does anybody have any announcements before we get started?
Yes, I've got 3. They should be pretty quick. Let's see. First, Adobe's monthly Adobe Video Community Meetup that they've been doing since about the beginning of this year. That's coming up on July 28th. The link for it, it's usually on our DMALA group page or Motion LA page on Facebook by now, but I still have to get it up there. But it should be up there soon if you don't already know how to find it. So again, that's Adobe Video Community Meetup. Something they'll actually be talking about is how the transcribe feature for Premiere has gone live. That used to only be in public beta, but now it works in the current version. And you may remember back in CS5, there was a transcription feature in Premiere that was like, you were lucky if half of it came back sounding like the person who was talking. It's improved significantly, like it really has. So that's definitely a feature to check out. And also there is a way to get it back into After Effects thanks to a free plugin by Digital Anarchy that's been around forever. So I'll try to get that into the info on Facebook as well. But last but not least, we of course our main sponsor is Adobe Systems Incorporated. So thank you, Adobe. And that's it for my announcements.
Nice.
Cheers.
And one other announcement I wanted to make is that if you guys have any questions for Geoff while we're watching his presentation or at any time, just throw them in the comments and we'll try to answer some questions in between the different segments. Geoff, I have a few questions for you before we start, and hopefully I won't be stepping on the toes of what you're going to talk about in your presentation. But I'll just try to, but just let me know, if it's something you cover in the video.
Okay.
But I was just wondering, for starters, so I know you've been working on games for a while, and you were doing VR for a little bit, and Now you're using Unity a lot. And can you just kind of give us a little background into how you went from being a motion designer and animator to a game designer?
You're right, that goes so far back. And it might have been Unity that was the impetus of that. Or rather, it was VR, yeah. I think Natalie gave me like the first ever like DK1 headset that came out of Kickstarter. You might know that as the Oculus now, but this is way back. And I was so obsessed with it. I was like, I need to know how to do this right now. This is like all I've ever wanted in video games, is to be able to be inside them. And I kind of went from there. But VR is very hard to develop for, and I began to like pull back and tried to do mobile because it's a little more manageable.
Yeah, it seems like it. Also, like, I don't know, it makes me dizzy every time I use it, so that must have been hard to be like testing out the game and constantly
going in and out of the headset constantly when you're testing a VR game like really messes with your head for sure.
What inspires your ideas for games? Is it like
other games?
Are there any particular ones that you really like or admire?
I mean, I talk about the games that inspired this particular one I'm working on in the presentation, but like, I don't know. I guess I particularly like a lot of Nintendo stuff, bright and colorful stuff, going back to like N64, like Banjo-Kazooie and things like that.
Cool. Well, maybe we can move into the first video now, and then we can really dive into your process.
Yeah, it's sort of a play in 3 acts, so I hope you enjoy.
Awesome.
Ooh, this is so exciting. I haven't spoken at DMALA in quite some time, but you know, I love a motion graphics audience. They pick a good seat, they put on their headphones, and then they leave you alone for the next 8 hours. Well, I guess that was kind of the before times. You know, now you're lucky if you get a thumbs up on Slack. Hi, my name is Geoff Ciccarelli. I'm an animator, designer, and alleged game dev. And tonight I'm going to be talking about the new game I've been working on called Plungeroo. For those of you who don't know, for the uninitiated, I actually do already have a game out there in the wild, and it is called Lunchblocks. Just a quick plug for this game. It was an attempt to do like a fresh take on a match 3 type of game. You actually try to match things up that don't match. Yeah, can you handle that? Some people can't. It's a little bit tricky. But it's on the Google Play Store, and yeah, that's right. For those of you looking at your Apple Watches, sipping your latte, looking at your iPhones, it is not for you. It's only on Android, which has to do with Apple being a bit difficult. Anyway, it's over 50 levels of food and fun. Really bad at self-promotion, but if you're interested, please do check it out. It was a lot of fun to make, and you know, it's pretty fun to play. So Lunchblocks took about 2 years. It took a long time. Spoiler alert, Unity and game design in general is a bit of a steep learning curve, so there's a lot to know. You know, we like to think of animation, or particularly animated shorts, as, you know, the intersection of a lot of disciplines, right? It's storytelling, it's artistic graphics, it's lighting, it's animation itself, sound effects, music, and all these things coming together. And when you're making a game, it's all of that plus a layer of interactivity. You know, is it fun? Is it a good user experience? All of those things. It's a whole other thing to add on top that you have to get used to. It makes you ask questions like, what even is fun? What even makes a game? That might sound like a weird question, but it's weirdly relevant. Think about Animal Crossing, which was a big deal during the pandemic. You know, you can't die in Animal Crossing. There's no losing. There's also no winning. You know, you can't finish it in a sense. So a game is more than just a win state or a lose state. It can be neither of those things, and yet you'd be hard-pressed to say that Animal Crossing is not a game. Yeah, big philosophical questions. We won't be talking about them tonight. I'm certainly by no means the authority on the answers to those things, like what is fun. It's obviously subjective, but something that's hotly debated. So instead, we'll be taking a look a little bit more at Plungeroo's artistic journey. Well, we can't really talk about the art too much until we talk a little bit, at least, about the game and the gameplay. So, like all things, we start at the beginning, and because all art is derivative and there are no new ideas, we begin with other people's games. Yay! I really wanted like a soundboard for this, like like podcasts and stuff, how they have sound effects, but I wasn't sure how to do that. So I'll provide my own cheesy applause. Yes, I want to do a quick plug for these other games that were a huge inspiration for Lunchbox or for Plungeroo. Oh my gosh, that's probably going to happen a few times. Huge inspiration for Plungeroo, and continue to be really, like, I've been studying them like under the microscope and just have learned so much from closely studying all these games. So very quickly, starting in the top right is a game called Cosmic Express. In the lower right is a game called Golf Peaks. In the middle with the cats is a game called Invento, and on the left is a game called Elo. And all of these are made by small teams of about 3 to 5 people. And I bring that up because as a solo developer, it's a good idea to keep an eye on what's achievable. I know for me, my eyes have always been too big for my stomach. It's very much like, I don't need anybody. I can do this all by myself, and I'm going to create the next like big Pixar movie, or whatever, the next big AAA game. And you kind of can't. You have to keep it a little bit more realistic. Otherwise, you'll be working on your game forever. So I like having these small teams to keep an eye on what is realistically achievable in a certain time frame. So with these small person teams, what you generally see is like a 3-person team where one person's on art, one person's on programming, and the other person is on music. And sort of everybody collaborates on game designs and ideas. Personally, I work alone because everybody sucks, and the only person you can count on in this life is yourself. But also, I just like doing everything. It's just a real fun chance to wear all the hats. I like to do the art. I like to do the programming. It's just sort of all fun in that personal project way. That's always a good time. So with these games, I started with these games as the main things I was looking at when I was trying to come up with my own game, and sort of came up with Plungeroo. Like I said, I'm not going to talk too much about the game design. But I am going to teach you your first piece of jargon. So take out your notebooks. Get ready. Write this down. Will be on the test. Your first game dev jargon is whiteboxing. So whiteboxing is the idea that you make your game and you want to get it to a really good place where it's playable, people are enjoying it, it's clicking with people, and that you can do all of that without any art. You can do that with gray boxes in a gray environment in a gray world. Kind of like my soul right now. Your game should just be fun without any frills. And then once it's in a good place, you can begin to replace those primitives and stand-ins with the art. So that's sort of what whiteboxing is. So you can see, so moving up here, this is the whitebox version of Plungeroo. This is sort of the place that it got to where I was testing it on my poor parents who are stuck with me during quarantine until things started to make sense and they were having fun. And so you can already see some similarities to the game reference. We have a grid-based type of game. From Invento here, this little tray of pieces that we're going to be used to manipulate the board. And Plungeroo itself, just you're like, what even is this game? It's pretty simple. It's just you're trying to get the ball into the goal, and you sort of have to hit all of these star bumpers along the way. So you can add the triangle bumpers to help manipulate the ball around and sink it into the goal. And that's really it. From there, obviously, there's more obstacles and things that are added in the way to make it tricky and to make it a puzzle. But the core concept is just knocking the ball around along a path to get it into the goal. And that's what we're looking at. And so the next task was to begin to dress this up. What does it really look like, and we'll go from there. So I guess we'll pause at this moment to see if there are any questions, and we'll throw it back to KT in the studio. Back to you, KT.
Thanks, Geoff. Reporting back in the DMALA studio. Awesome! Wow. So yeah, that was actually going to be my first question to you, as far as like how the design process starts. Whether you start with sketches or it's interesting to see that whiteboarding process. So, or white boxing. Sorry. So I guess what I'm wondering is, like, how do you even come up with like the game in the first place? Like, did you just see those shapes in your head and is it based on any other type of game, or did you just completely come up with it from scratch? Oh, you're on mute.
There we go. I feel like that's a lot of questions at once.
Oh, sorry.
Plungeroo specifically is kind of like if you got one hit. So in Golf Peaks, one of the games that I brought up as the reference, you're like putting the ball around the board and you get so many strokes where you can chip or putt the ball. Plungeroo sort of became like Golf Peaks if you had to get a hole-in-one every time, combined with like the manipulating the board that you do in Invento. So it sort of became like a little bit of those two games coming together. But the game itself didn't start out like that. I actually started trying to make a different game. I was trying to make something that was like about growing food in a garden, and it just wasn't working. Like it wasn't a good puzzle, like as a puzzle. So I found this really good YouTube tutorial that was about like how to like come up with a game idea, and I was like, let's watch this, because we can figure this out in 10 minutes. This person must have nailed it. But they actually had good advice, which was that a good game, you don't need to worry about the goal so much. It's actually about the rules, and the rules have to be consistent and clear and obvious. And it was apparent that with my little harvesting game where you're going to be picking up these vegetables, that I didn't have clear and consistent rules. And so even though I was set on the goal that you would pick up all the vegetables, that's not enough. And so with Plungeroo, I began just trying to come up with rules, and I sort of ended up on this bouncing thing. And then when you have good rules, your goal becomes obvious. Like, oh, you can just get in the goal. Or at a certain point, Plungeroo was you had multiple balls trying to get into different targets and stuff like that. But the goals themselves reveal themselves, if that makes sense.
Yeah. And you actually finished, well, as you mentioned, Lunch Blocks. You took that game from start to finish and released it and everything. So what did you learn from that experience, and how is this process different based on having done that?
Oh my gosh. The biggest thing I learned, like in between the two games, was like efficiency, like programming efficiency. Lunchblocks, this is very like under the hood, but Lunchblocks is very inefficient under the hood. And if you play the game, you'll see it lag in moments where like if too much happens on the screen at one time, it'll really like chug even on a phone. And like stuff like that, getting towards the end of that and then getting the beginning of Plungeroo was the biggest difference. I really learned a lot about how to build your code in a way that's a bit like Lego blocks. Like you want them to all be separate but work together really well, so that when you need to tinker any piece, you're not affecting the whole chain and it doesn't fall apart like a house of cards. Yeah,
kind of like when you're setting up an animation or a comp and you want it to be procedural so that you can easily edit it down the road instead of making it too complicated.
Take that kind of thinking and apply it here. Yeah, for sure. Mm-hmm.
Great. Well, anybody else have questions before we move on to the next video? All right, let's roll it.
Wow, great questions. I don't know if there were questions. It was probably just crickets. So, let's keep moving. This next section should be a little bit faster. And since we like stealing, I mean reference, we move on to the artistic reference. Yay! More sound effects. I don't know about you guys, but I can always go down a Pinterest rabbit hole. It is so easy to spend endless amounts of time there. So I just started pulling lots of things. CG reference, 2D reference, color palettes, and of course actual pinball boards. What does other people's pinball art look like? And actual pinball boards. I watched a few YouTube videos of people playing on vintage cabinets and learned a lot from that. There's a lot going on pinball boards that you didn't know about. Flippers, slingshots, kickbacks, ramps, magnets, tilt bobs. It's a lot. They're very busy. And if you're wondering about the name of the game, Plungeroo, actually typed in pinball slang, and lo, the internet will help you out. And it was like 10 pieces of pinball slang, and a Plungeroo is the name of somebody who's obsessed with pinball. Apparently, also, another word for this is a pinhead, but I didn't think that would be as good of a word for the name of the game. So I grabbed all this reference, and, you know, there's nothing to do but jump in. So I started here with this kind of line art look, trying to keep it really simple. Now, I know I said that I fully white boxed my game and then started doing the art, but I lied. I was doing a little bit of art and then working on the white box version of the game, and, you know, things changed back and forth, back and forth. So you're going to see some out-of-date ideas here, but there were still questions when trying to come up with the art in particular. Things like this. So originally, the bumpers were not in the little tray at the bottom. They were already on the board, and it was going to be this idea that you could slide them on little tracks. So it's kind of like, what do those little tracks look like? And there was this other idea where you'd be able to hold down a button that would also affect like similarly colored pieces on the board, kind of like an A and a B state of what this flipper is doing. So started out here very simple with this kind of line art look, very 2D. You know, I was thinking in Unity it would be done with their 2D sprites and stuff like that. But I wanted to experiment with a 3D look, so I began here. And I liked this idea because it felt a little bit like an actual toy. You know, like on your phone, it would feel like you were actually poking around at like an actual little toy pinball cabinet, which I thought was cute. And I tried this like forced perspective. You know, like the old Clue board where you'd look down into the little rooms? That's what this reminded me of. I always really liked that. So I tried that, but it did feel like the perspective was a little off. So I moved on to something like this. But then it started to feel like the pieces were sitting, like it almost feels like they're sitting on top of like a table, like the ball would just roll off. And so then I landed here, and this sort of became one of the good basis for where things began to go. We can get a little bit of that illusion of depth of like the back of the pinball cabinet, but still the really strong orthographic perspective. And again, those little lines and being able to add a pop of color with the button, although sadly, the pop of color in the button is all gone now. But you can sort of see the evolution of the design as we move from here through here. And I really liked this purple image. I thought this was really cool, really fun color palette. And you can see the similarities from the game reference too in the Cosmic Express with this checker grid. I really liked that. I liked the idea of not having to draw actual grid lines to perceive where the grid is, since in the game you're, you know, trying to keep in your head and imagine where the ball is going to go moving on this, you know, grid-based movement system. So I sort of like that interpretation. And then I just began to play with wilder color palettes. What can we get away with here? What's fun? But it definitely, for the one on the right here in particular, I think it starts to feel a little too busy, a little too crowded. You know, from a user perspective with the lines and the two-tone colors and everything going on, it definitely starts to feel like, where's the ball going? I can't even tell. This is way too distracting. So it was sort of good to try to take it too far. You can always pull things back. So I sort of play through there, and then I like how a lot of pinball boards have themes. I love a good theme. Even the pinball theme in general, you know, I just love a good theme. And so I was like, oh, I should theme my pinball cabinets. And I decided that for the first level, since it's kind of like the tutorial, the first few levels in the tutorial, and you're learning, you're like a student, so an apple. I know, I know. I can't get over how clever I am. And that the pinball bumpers would begin to feel like the seeds inside the apple and stuff like that. And you can see here that I tried to experiment with another idea of what the slider might look like underneath. I tried this like square thing, but too chunky, too crazy. And like I said, this idea ended up going out the window because you don't slide the pieces around anymore. But nevertheless, you can see how I tried to start pulling the full image together, like where the UI is going to be at the top of the screen and what fits on, you know, a phone that's going to be 1080 by 1920 roughly, or like, what is that, like 9 by 16 or 16:9? I always forget which way those numbers go. And then another thing that I experimented with, but I haven't really used yet, is what would this forced perspective look like if there was different layers, you know, of heights. Something that happens a lot in Golf Peaks is, you can see even here in this reference, that there's different heights of the blocks because you can chip the ball as well as putt. In my own game, for the most part, I'm just hitting the ball around, and I think it makes the most sense on a flat surface. But I still wanted to experiment a little bit with, is this readable, you know, if we elevate some of the blocks, and what does that potentially look like? So for the most part, that's the main design as it went through while the game was still a little bit more in flux. And I'm going to pause there before we take our final lap through the final iterations of where the game is at right now.
That was great. I love seeing how it all, like, seeing the evolution of the design. That was so cool. Do you ever find yourself, like, if you have a design that you really like, but it doesn't totally fit the gameplay as you've set it up, do you ever find yourself, like, adjusting, you know, the way that the design of the game looks to suit the aesthetic? Or do you think that it's always like that white box that you showed us in the beginning, like you want to be strict and stick to that, and the aesthetic part comes second? Oh, you're on mute again.
I want to say the aesthetic probably always comes a little bit second to the gameplay. It really does have to serve the gameplay, not the other way around. But it does inspire ideas sometimes for the gameplay, and I talk about that a little bit in the last video.
Cool. And you might get to this in the last video as well, but how does Illustrator integrate with Unity? Is it pretty seamless, or are there, like, any workarounds you have to do to make it work the way you want to bring things?
Well, spoiler alert, and you'll see a little bit of this, but the game is actually 3D. It's easier to use the illusion with the orthographic camera and actually have the ball move around in 3D space with real 3D pieces and just look 2D. But I have done, Lunchblocks is all Illustrator into Unity. And, you know, it's fine. It's great. You just export everything, and then it finds everything automatically, and you can drop everything in. And Unity does take vector graphics now. That's like, I don't know how new that is, but it is a thing you can do, is that you can actually set them to vector, and it has its own vector-specific settings.
Cool.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I don't want to steal anything from the last video, so maybe we should just go into that.
I do have a question before we go ahead. One of the things that I see that you use, well, let me back up. So as a graphic designer, one of my things when I was growing up, I hated math. I use math every single day in every single thing that I do. And I really wish that I would have been better and would have been taught better at it. What you're using is not only math, but algebra, geometry. Are you just inherently good at that? Or did you have to learn that?
I guess I wasn't inherently good at it. But I will say just a small plug for programming in general, because I hear a lot like, oh, I can't handle all that math. Let me tell you, inside T, it's very little math. Programming is a lot more logic than it is math, and those are different things. It's more like stepping through your ideas one thing at a time, like a computer, you're like, and then this does this, and then this does this. When you get into math, I mean, some like weird geometry does come up, like when you're converting radians into degrees and like things like that. But that's very specific. Like for the most part, you can probably make a game without doing almost any math. The computer handles a lot of that for you. So I just want to say, like, don't be afraid. Don't be scared of the math. It's way more logic. If you like languages, I would say it's actually a lot more akin to that, because you're really speaking the computer's language when you speak a programming language. It's less about, you're not doing nuclear fission. It's, it's the ball goes in +1 to the goal. It's nothing too complicated.
Well, that's very reassuring.
And speaking of that, how did you teach yourself that language?
Oh, well, I had one benefit. I took a programming class in high school and I had a really great teacher. And so even though it was a different language than what I'm using for Unity, they're all so similar, like the concepts are similar. Kind of like if you try to go from C4D to Maya, everything's more or less the same. You extrude geometry, you use whatever bevels, etc. Like it's all that stuff is in there. So once you know the library for the specific language, you're good to go. Programming concepts all transfer across all languages.
Cool. Well, I think I'm still frozen. I don't know if you guys can hear me.
Yeah,
We can hear you.
Okay, cool. So let's jump into the last video then.
More spline, please. So filthy. It's such a good joke. Yeah. Oh, can you just hang on for like 1 second? Seriously, just like 1, 2, yeah. So, our game is coming together, and now we need to figure out some more questions with the design. One of the things that I became really obsessed with was, what is the biggest size grid that I can fit on the phone where I feel like it's still clear, to see the pathway of the ball and to touch the pieces. You don't want the pieces to be getting so tiny that they are too hard to like touch and move with your finger, or too tiny. And I actually discovered like your finger can make them disappear, and then you're like, I can't even see the piece that I'm moving. It's kind of another problem. So, with Inbento, to take a quick look here, their puzzles get really tricky, but they never have more than like a 4x4 grid. Like they were able to keep their boards really small, so they have this nice, they feel close to you, and they feel sort of chunky or whatever. It's cute. And for mine, I was like, I know that the puzzles will feel very limited if I try to keep the boards that small. So what is the biggest size we can fit on the screen? And then another problem that I was dealing with at the same time was sort of the plunger. I wanted it to have a nice clear amount of space for you to satisfyingly like pull it down for it to flip back up and, push the ball out onto the board. But with the tray being along the bottom, I was afraid they would overlap. So I was like, can I put the tray off to the side, the tray of pieces, and get the board in there? But honestly, this is so small. Like when I saw it on my phone, it was so tiny, and not even that big of a board. So then I tried this idea. I was like, what if I move the tray of pieces, onto the pinball cabinet, so it sort of feels like you're pulling them, up from there, especially since I got rid of that button that I thought was really fun. But I thought this kind of looked a little awkward, and it was also bumping up against another problem, which is that the boards themselves were also feeling limited in design if the plunger was always in the bottom right corner. So even though that is the most, intuitive for a pinball machine, there's only so many pathways the ball can take and stuff around the board if you start like that. So I began to design puzzles with the plunger moving around to like any square, all the way to left, some in the center, which opened up a lot more variety. So I didn't like the idea of putting these this chunk of pieces, I knew that there would probably be no more than 6 at any one time, so the design had to accommodate 6 slots, if you will. But then what do? Every time there's a level, it has to 4 on one side, 2 on the other. Like if the plunger's in the middle, it was starting to feel a little too awkward. But I did like something that came of this, which was there we go. Sorry about that. Which was like the little, that it feels like it's on little stilts. The pinball machine feels a little bit thicker and more 3D or something in a way. And so I decided to keep that. Another idea to try to help create space and to be able to enlarge the board was to get rid of the UI. What if we take the UI off the top of the screen? We get a lot of space back up at the top. And since I did kind of miss those buttons on the front of the machine, I tried this idea of putting the undo and the restart button, respectively, on the machine. But again, it had the same issue of like, well, I guess I could come up with, if the plunger's in the middle, and it's accommodating for a lot of scenarios in a way that feels cumbersome from a programming standpoint, since I can't foresee all the layouts in which I might want to lay out the puzzles. Having something that gets in the way where you need like a custom board every time didn't seem like a good idea. So I did eventually, get rid of that too. But I did like this trail on the bottom, and just having the one row sort of created the most amount of space and keeping the thickness of the pinball machine. So I really like that. And so then one of the next questions was future themes. How do we take our idea and add a new theme? And I knew I wanted to do a golf one. And so then I was like, oh, can I have, the fairway and the hazards? And I was like, yeah, that's cool. But then it's a lot more work. Again, trying to keep that in mind of what I can do by myself to also give myself the most chance to have a lot of levels and have many, many levels. This would require, bespoke illustrations for every level that is of the golf theme, which started to feel like a lot of work. Whereas with the checkerboard pattern, that's easily programmatical. And to see a little bit behind the scenes here, it's something that I can add in. So with each world, this is your quick dive into Unity, I can lay out what these colors are. For instance, grid square color A and B are these 2 colors, and for every level in this world, they'll easily have that layout, as opposed to this needing a custom illustration that would have to be projected. I wasn't even really sure how that would work. And so then thinking about that, it started to feel inconsistent up against the checkerboard. So what does the apple look like if you have to draw a picture of the apple for all the apple boards? And, you take a look at this and you think it's just a little too vaginal, and you move on. But the one thing that did come from this idea was I was like, oh, what if the hazards are, sunken down so that you can't even put the ball there, and that gave way to a new gameplay idea that I hadn't thought of, which is squares being eliminated from the board. So when you're taking your pieces off the tray here and you're trying to rotate them and put them on the board, that it's no longer a nice, neat grid. Now you have to accommodate weirder shapes where you can place the board. And I really like that idea. And so that brings us to where things kind of are right now, which is these 2 boards. So you can see how I solved the golf course one, the 2-tone green, and then just like the water hazard in the back. I really like this, actually. I like the simplicity of it. Very easy to replicate into future levels with future themes. Like if they also utilize this idea of pieces missing from the board, we can just have one nice, image back there, and thinking about putting a little movement on the water and stuff like that. So, and I'm hoping, and I'm still experimenting with this a little bit, but I'm hoping that this is enough room to pull the plunger down and not run into the tray. And of course, everybody's phone, just like another annoying thing to keep in mind, is that phones actually are slightly different dimensions. So you want to grab the person's unique phone resolution and then sort of space out things. The pinball cabinet goes in the center of the screen, the UI goes a certain % down from the top, and the tray, and so on, so that some my point being that on some phones that are longer, you'll have more room to pull that plunger, and on other ones, not quite as much room. So this is sort of where the design is at right now. And then I know you already got to see like a sneak peek of what's going on in Unity, but I'll show you here. Let's press play on our game and let it compile for a moment. It's thinking about it. So much of game design is waiting around. And so here is what the game looks like in Unity. And we can actually start with an earlier level here. Loop, and it slides in. And we can drag and drop our pieces. You can also rotate your pieces and drop them on the board. And the plunger, you can pull it right now, but it doesn't do anything. You've actually pushed this button to push the plunger, and there you go. So one of the last things that I began experimenting with is what the pieces look like after you hit them, because pinball machines are all about the blinking lights and the feedback, you know, and the interactivity as you play. So I like this idea of as you hit the pieces, they'll blink in some way or light up, and when you sink the ball into the goal, the pinball machine will flash. So that's kind of future things that I need to work out in the design, but here's just a few ideas that I came up with, and you know, more questions of how much work will it be to have more themes, like if on the Apple board all the bumpers light up with little seeds inside the suggested seeds, and the space level might have stars on it and so on, or should they all just have the same design, you know, and is that easier? It's a shortcut to take, but it will also relieve some pressure from me since there's so much other stuff to do. So here we go, just another quick, it's fun to, even when you know the answers, it's fun to play, but there you go, it goes around. And the boards get more complicated from there. And then your little sneak peek is that this is all actually CG. Ooh, look at how crazy it looks compared to when it's in the forced perspective. Pretty neat, right? It's really thick. And also, and this is something that I've been obsessed with lately and boring my friends with, is it's also procedurally built, meaning that each of these sections is an individual section, so that at runtime, including the shadow, look at that, even the shadow is just a piece of the shadow, so that no matter how big these boards get, I don't have to make cabinets that are the size that, you know, ahead of time. Basically, the game can take this set of pieces, whether it's the corner piece here or the side pieces, and it can build the boards to whatever size that I say I want them to be, which is something that's defined over here. See? So here we have the level, and this is the information about level number 3, and its grid is 3x4. So those types of ways of thinking, again, a whole nother talk about, you know, trying to, you know, work smart, not hard, in the sense of how efficient can you make things, but just something that I've been interested in. So anyway, that's sort of the whole experience, ta-da, of Plungeroo, and I do hope that you can play it soon. I mean, you know, soon probably means like next year, because I don't know if you guys heard, but there's this thing called work. It takes up so much time. Like, it's always in the way. You can never do what you want to do. And, you know, there's this thing I've also heard of, maybe you've heard of it, it's called rent. Ugh, what a pain. So, you know, it'll be a bit, but I hope that you guys can play it soon. And I promise I'm working hard. So thanks for checking this out. And I guess I'll throw it back to KT one more time, and we'll wrap this baby up.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I have a question right off the bat. You talked about previewing your work on the device and then going back and revising it. Was that before you got to Unity or after you got to, like, where in your process were you doing that preview? Or have you been doing that preview?
Oh, you can compile out of Unity right to your phone. So that way I can check.
So you weren't doing it like from the Illustrator side, or like just taking a screenshot and looking at it on your phone?
Oh, I do that
Unity.
sometimes.
Yeah,
yes,
sometimes? Okay.
Yeah. I do take screenshots, and then I have to send them to myself in GChat, and then I open them up and, like, you know, take a look at them.
Take a look at what's like.
Yeah.
I have a question as well. First, bravo! It looks awesome. I love that you're thinking about the UX, while you're designing the UI. I think that's super cool and exciting. But my question is actually about sound. Like, do you have a plan currently? Because sound is such a big part of pinball and gaming experience in general. So.
It totally is, and it's generally my weakest point. But there are lots of resources for being able to purchase sound effect libraries to take advantage of not having to record everything yourself. And then I do have a friend who, his name is Eric Blood. He did the music for Lunchblocks, and I'll probably tap him again for some music for Plungeroo.
Oops. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
We can't hear you. Yes.
Okay,
Yeah.
I don't know what's going on with my video, but
Yeah, we're still hearing you though.
okay. You mentioned that you're still in process of finishing it, and man, it seems like a lot of work to do, in addition to like your full-time job. So how long does it typically take from start to finish? And did this one take the same amount of time as the first one, or is this any faster?
Well, Lunchblocks took 2 years, I think, from start to finish. Like when I really decided, like, I'm done, I can't do this anymore. Because Lunchblocks is the kind of game, like if you play any other like Candy Crush or Two Dots or any of those types of things, they're built to go on ad infinitum. Like they have thousands of levels. So,
Right.
But like I sort of hit a point with Lunchblocks where I was like, I can't take it anymore. I got to do something new. But that was so it's not that. I am hoping that this is going by faster in a certain way, but I still expect it to take a year or so. And if I wasn't working full time, I think it could be so much faster. It's amazing when you're like, oh, I have a week off. You're like, whoa, I'm gonna finish this thing next week, and then you get back to work and you're like, oh crap.
Yeah, for sure.
Do you set your own like delivery schedule, or set your own benchmarks for where you'll be at with the game? And you try to, or you just kind of just go with the flow and you get there when you get there?
Can't you tell I have such an easy breezy personality? I just go with the flow.
Exactly.
I do. I don't set like official benchmarks, but I do try to hit vague moments where some of them has to do with family. Like if I know we're getting together and I want to force my family members to play it, I'll be like, okay, I have to have it like up to a certain standard to be able to pass my phone to them and say, please, poke it, try it,
And how do you know you're making it? Oh, sorry.
Oh, yeah. I had a question.
Sure.
How do you balance, your time between working and working on a project like this? Do you like block off time every day or just whenever you have time?
Balance, huh? I do try to work on at least like a couple times a week, and generally with working remotely, so you're kind of like glued to your desk. It's like as soon as the workday ends, I'll pull it up and try to work for like an hour or two to make sure that I just keep going. That helps a lot. Yeah. When we used to go out and then come home, it would be so hard. Like, because you get home and then you're like, I just want to sit and like eat dinner or whatever. And then to have to like pry yourself up off the couch to get back to work sucked. But now it's like, you could just quick do it.
That's a cool strategy. Sometimes I try to do something like that, but then I end up, like working so much that I'll be working on, my personal projects till like 1 a.m.
Yeah. Hashtag relatable content, especially here. Things are a little weird because I do a lot of work for LA. And so I kind of keep to their schedule. So I sleep late and then stay up late. And my breakfast is now at midnight. But you don't want to eat too close to bedtime. So sometimes I'll be working on my personal projects, miss breakfast, like a late night thing, and then go, oh, I have to go to bed hungry tonight because I got 2 into my game.
I don't think we've shared with our audience where you're located right now.
Oh, I'm about an hour north of Philly. That's where I'm located. Mm-hmm.
I have another question.
Sure.
So it just looks really cool, and I know you're saying it's on Google Play, but like, do you have any intention to bringing it to iOS? Because I just feel like maybe that's going to only help its success and how available it is.
Oh, that's a lovely thought. Be sure to let Apple know because they're a huge pain. They're also a lot more money. So when you get started on Google, it's a $20 entry fee. You're done. It's a one-time fee to sign up to like get onto their storefront. Although they do take a 30% cut, they want their money. It's not really fair. That's also a whole nother talk. But Apple is a $100 yearly fee just to have your game on their storefront before they even start taking their cut. So since Lunchbox doesn't make any money and Plungeroo has not proved itself yet, it doesn't really seem reasonable to spend like $100 when it's a little untested. But you know, it would be nice.
Do you think that the reason why that is, it gets the people that aren't really invested in this, it weeds those people out?
Absolutely. I mean, you know, there's a case for and against. It raises the higher barrier of entry. So, you know, little indie devs who might have trouble getting off the ground, it's going to be harder for them to get on the Apple platform. But it does curate the Apple platform and keep off a lot of detritus. So, you know.
Yep.
So Geoff, you mentioned like you kind of like tamper your expectations because you're only one person doing everything. But like, what if you were in charge of a whole team and you could make any game you wanted? What would you make?
Oh my gosh, I don't even dare to dream that big. But if I could make any game I wanted type of deal, I would probably get back to VR because then I'd have the chance to really make something like big and epic and expansive, and you know, you really disappear into that world. But very time consuming to develop for. Yeah.
I think to add to that question, but I think you're poised to, you know, potentially take that next step if that was something that interests you, because the only difference between you and a lot of people that I work with and talk to really is like, say, an investor who could say fund a year or two of development, and then suddenly you can afford to pay yourself, pay a team of people. Your idea, your output is larger. You can reach both platform, you know, whatever platforms you want to reach. And suddenly, if the game makes money, now you're making money. You can start thinking about the next version, the next thing, and like you're literally right at that precipice now, in my opinion. Just
thank you. It would be a lot of responsibility, but very exciting. Yeah.
Cool.
Cool. Well, if anyone else have any questions? If not, we can.
I think that's it.
Yeah.
But also, a big thanks to Geoff. And he says, you know, this is a side project for him. Knowing Geoff for so long, he has so many side projects. This is not his only side project. So it is amazing the amount of creativity that comes out of this man and the amount of hours that he dedicates to his craft. Really, it's overwhelming to a lot of people. And when he says things like, oh, it's just like a logic puzzle, it's just learning this, take that with a grain of salt, because for mere mortals, it may take a little bit longer than someone who knows how to juggle 4 independent projects and work together.
Thank you. That's very sweet.
But thank you, Geoff.
Yeah. Thank you. Awesome job.
Well, thank you so much for having me. It was so fun to record that, and I hope it showed. It was fun.
Absolutely. And thank you guys all for joining us.
Thanks.
We'll see you next month. Bye.
Bye. Good night.